Thanks, guys, for making it today. Today is the developer meeting, August edition. All right, so we're gonna go through a few updates since last meeting. We're gonna talk about a new swap endpoints for the ZRX API. Fulvio is gonna walk us through that. We have a few plans to reduce gas cost in our contracts, and Michael is in the call to walk us through that. Alex Toll is gonna tell us a little bit more about Augur launch. As you know, last time we had actually Paul from Augur as an ecosystem spotlight. So Augur launched around a week ago. So Alex is going to tell us more about it. And I will walk you through a few stats and updates around governance towards the end of the meeting. Let's first have a look at our roadmap slide. As you know, we've been doing this for a few months now. We focus mostly on what has changed since last time. And actually, I want to kind of focus on one particular item. The second row there was not there before. We thought it would be important to highlight the fact that now that we have introduced a new exchange proxy architecture, we want to focus on improving the gas cost for that pipeline. And we started working on that. And Michael is going to, again, tell us more about it. There was an item on ZRX API, the one in bold, around the on-chain swap function. We actually a little bit changed the goal of that item. Instead of providing an entry point directly for a swap on ZRX chain, on ZRX for on-chain swaps, we actually started integrating that flow in a more seamless way. And you'll see the impact of that on ZRX API updates from Fulvia. And yeah, that's pretty much it, really. Then there's been the vote around ZIP 79. I'm going to give you more updates on that. So this is I'd say the bulk of what we've been working on. Behind the scenes, there's been a lot of work by the team on integrating some parts of the technology for Matcha DEX. As you've seen, we had a few updates over the course of the last few weeks. So with that, I'm gonna pass the ball to Fulvia.
Thanks, Theo. Great to see you all. I hadn't been in one of these in a while. So I wanted to give you some updates around the things that we have been working on over the last few months with regards to ZRX API. And I also want to share with you some interesting developments and a new version of the API that we're going to be rolling out soon. So I hope you get excited about this. The first thing I wanted to share is that we have been adding a few new liquidity sources. So the API now aggregates liquidity from Balancer as well as the REN-BTC curves. So that brings us to a total of Kyber, Uniswap, Uniswap V2, Oasis, ZRX Mesh, Balancer, and REN-BTC in curve. So 7 liquidity sources. And we're also working to aggregate Bancor V2. So we'll have a total of 8 liquidity sources that we aggregate from. We've also started working on Bunny Hub. Bunny Hub is a project that complements our smart order routing as a backup when direct routes cannot be found or do not exist. So imagine markets or trades where there isn't really good liquidity. Bunny Hub allows us to break this trade into smaller parts or different pieces so that we can find the best path or route for those specific trades. And as Theo gave a heads up, we have been working on lowering transaction costs, and I won't go too deep in this. I will show you some interesting data that we have been gathering, but I'll let Michael give you all the details about this. Next slide, please. All right, so we're gonna be rolling out a new version of the swap endpoint of the API. We are actually testing this out currently just with Matcha, but there are some pretty cool improvements included in this upgrade. The first one is that this version actually routes trades to the exchange proxy. So, and a bunch of other stuff. Some of the benefits of Swap V1 is that we have removed protocol fees for on-chain sources. So this means that trades that are routed to Uniswap, Core, Balancer, Kyber, all of these external liquidity sources are now cheaper. We have also enabled to buy ETH. So if you are an API integrator, you probably are aware that the ZRX API B0 only supported buying WET, but it will now be possible to sell a token and receive ETH to with B1, essentially improving the user experience and making this WET unwrapping a little bit more seamless. It will also now be possible for users to increase the gas price in MetaMask without running into reverts from doing so. So one thing that happened on B0 is that whenever a user changed the gas price in MetaMask, often the transaction ended up in a revert. Now the way that we have been working on fallback quotes allows us to be able to remove this case. So if the user now goes to MetaMask and changes the price, the gas price, the transaction will probably go through. And then another thing that we have been working on is improving the speed of the response times. So every time that we add a new liquidity source, the response times usually increase a little bit, sometimes more than others. But we have been working to optimize the response times and keeping them pretty stable regardless of how many sources we are now sourcing liquidity from. Next slide, please. So what does swap B0 versus B1 looks like in terms of gas cost? Transaction cost is something that we are heavily focusing on because on one hand, it makes our quoted prices look higher than other aggregators, and sometimes the user doesn't have the understanding that quoted prices doesn't necessarily lead to best realized prices. So we have been looking to reduce this quote unquote sticker shock that we call it. So that's one of the reasons that we are looking at gas cost, but also because we do want to make the transactions that go through the ZRX API cheaper. So one thing that we are comparing swap B0 to B1 on is gas cost. And I want to
Sorry, guys.
Can you still see the screen, the slides? Yes?
I can still see them.
Okay, good. It's just that it said that Teal had left. So this is the reason why we've been focusing on gas costs heavily. So I wanted to share what B0 versus B1 look like. As you can see in the graph, so the blue bars are swap B0, and the yellow and the orange bars are swap B1. And when it comes to ERC20 swaps, so this graph shows results for a sample of sizes for DAI USDC. When it comes to ERC20 swaps, B0 has an advantage since there's no need for a middleman contract. This gap shrinks eventually and reverses as the size of the swap increases, because the bigger the trade is, the more likelihood there is that it will include breach orders. So the exchange proxy, which is used in B1, is more efficient at filling breach orders and also does not pay, as I mentioned, a protocol fee for these breach orders. So many of you might have been when Lawrence went through the exchange proxy meeting, but the exchange proxy is also like a forwarder-like contract that acts as a middleman between the taker and the exchange. Thus, it incurs a similar baseline overhead as the ETH ERC20 swaps on B0 that I'm going to show you next. But the whole point of this slide is that there's still room for improvement. B1 performs better in terms of transaction cost the larger the trade is, because the exchange proxy is more effective or more efficient at filling breach orders, which are more likely to be included in larger trades. Next slide, please. So for ETH ERC20 quotes, B0 and B1 start off in a more even baseline. B0 relies on the forwarder contract So this one, as I mentioned, also it incurs a similar baseline overhead than the exchange proxy. So just like with the ERC20 swaps, B1 takes like overtake, has more advantage as the value of the trade increases, um, because we leverage cheaper bridge fills as well. So with that said, I'm gonna turn it over to Michael, who's gonna walk us through some of the things that we are working on to make one more competitive in gas cost.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so as Fulvia said, and as everyone may have noticed recently, gas prices have been quite high. So we've been thinking a lot about how we can optimize for gas in the new exchange proxy architecture. So just to give sort of an overview of how the architecture looks today, I have that diagram at the top. So here the cat represents the taker of a swap quote transaction. So currently in V1, they would have to have their taker tokens transferred into the Flash wallet, which is part of the exchange proxy architecture. And then as sort of a legacy of what bridge fills looked like in V0, the Flash wallet has to transfer those tokens to the Curve bridge, for example, which then performs the swap with the Curve pool. And then the maker tokens sort of retrace those steps to be sent back to the taker. So one of the optimizations that we're working on currently is to cut out the Curve bridge from this this process, and instead sort of wrap the Curve or other liquidity source interactions into the Flash wallet step. So this cuts down the number of transactions by 2, and allows us to shave off a significant amount of gas. Next slide. So yeah, here we can see some simulations of exactly how much gas we would be saving, and it's sort of in the ballpark of like 50K on average across the board. So yeah, so now we see that the V1 endpoint is beating the V0 endpoint on gas across all swap sizes. So we should expect to see those savings live in V1 fairly soon. Next slide. Obviously, one caveat of that optimization is that it only applies to bridge fills, and it doesn't really apply to native ZRX orders. However, we are also thinking about how we're going to migrate settlement over to the exchange proxy architecture, which would basically give us ZRX v4. And once we do that, we'll see the same sort of reduction in gas costs for native ZRX orders. The taker will no longer have to interact with the Flash wallet in order to fill native ZRX orders, and instead can just have those assets exchanged directly between the taker and the maker. So again, cutting out two transfers. I'm also personally excited about the migration of settlement over to the new architecture, because it'll allow us to do a lot of more fun stuff and iterate quickly on sort of core parts of the ZRX exchange that would otherwise take, many months of development, and basically it'll allow us to tighten up our development cycle.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, as a reminder, for those that maybe still don't are super familiar with what the exchange proxy is, if you want, is really the version 4 of the protocol without, but now acting as an extension, if you want. We are testing out this new architecture that will allow us to go, as Michael said, much faster in adding new functionality to the contracts. We are testing it as an extension right now, and when we will move settlement, as it's shown in this slide, that's obviously going to be a governance type of decision from the community, because that's going to be basically equivalent to saying, okay, this exchange proxy now is the version 4 of the protocol. But yeah, we're very excited to test out this on the new API endpoints on Matcha directly too. So we are able to learn and make sure that we will go and we'll be ready with the governance vote with a solid architecture that will help us go much faster. Are there any questions around Exchange Proxy, the new API endpoints? No, we can tackle them even later. I think Fulvia is with us for other 10 minutes in case you have questions around API. Fulvia, this is for you as well, I think.
Yeah, another important announcement is that we are going to be deprecating LaunchKit and Instant in the coming weeks. So just to clarify, that tools will still be available for those of you that are using it or want to use them, but new features and live support will stop. So basically what the next steps look like over the next 2 weeks, we're going to add deprecation warnings on the repos and the guides for these two products and tools. We're going to announce also the deprecation in the corresponding Discord channels. And after a few weeks, we're going to close the Discord channels. So just something to be aware of. We don't have an exact date, so we will be announcing that soon over Discord. Any questions around the deprecation? All right.
Okay, let's move on. Alex, I think.
Yep. Yeah, so as some of you probably know, Augur is actually building their exchange functionality on top of ZRX, which is really exciting for a couple of different reasons. And they're also building their application with a browser-based mesh node running in the background, which is actually how they source their liquidity and show it in the UI. So they launched last week, and it has been pretty successful so far. So in the first day alone, we had over 10,000 nodes join the mesh network, which is the most nodes that we've ever had. We've already had a number of markets open and a lot of open orders, and we've already had upwards of $50,000 already traded. So just by the numbers, this has been really exciting. But from a different perspective, this has been a great development as well, because it's actually allowed us to really work on improving our mesh technology, specifically in the browser. So if we could go to the next slide. So prior to Augur launching, we'd been working on browser-based mesh nodes for a number of months, but we didn't have any major applications using browser-based mesh in the wild. And we probably did not have the capability of supporting the kind of usage that we're seeing right now. But leading up to the Augur launch for a couple of months, we've been pushing really hard on making a number of improvements to both standalone nodes and browser nodes specifically. And we've made a number of really impactful optimizations, some of which have filtered down to other mesh nodes. So a couple notable ones to point out are that we've sped up order sync significantly. So for just some parts of order sync, we've sped it up by over 6 times. So, and there are multiple other areas that we've seen 1000x improvements in, including JSON schema validation and JSON encoding. So a lot of these changes just affected the browser, but some of them, like I said, also pervaded our standalone nodes. And the most significant one of these is that we've actually been able to squash a number of bugs in order sync that we had never found before. So an example of one of these bugs is that previously, during order sync, a order sync provider would check their own order filter against their database. And now they correctly check the order filter of the other node. So this is really going to reduce the bandwidth in our network just as a whole, and it also makes order sync a lot more viable for applications that want to use a browser-based mesh node. So yeah, it's really good for ZRX, and it's also really improved Mesh's technology. Yeah, does anyone have any questions about that? Cool.
All right, thanks, Alex. By the way, I want to go back to this slide just to encourage everybody to try out Augur, their UI. And as for those that are not familiar, this is like a prediction markets protocol, and it came with a UI hosted on IPFS. And again, it's running a mesh node on the browser. So really, you as a user you're basically part of the network directly. You're not accessing basically another entry point. You are running the node itself. So it's pretty interesting piece of technology, and it opens up interesting applications. But yeah, just a big call out for the product. And also we had the team last ecosystem developer meeting. If you're interested, there are the recording in the main repo. So you can go to the July ZRX ecosystem developer meeting. There's a 30 minutes presentation by Paul about Augur. So if you're interested, definitely check that out. All right, now we're going to go through a few updates around governance. This is actually not upcoming, but actually it's a vote that is completed. We basically successfully passed another proposal to decrease the protocol fee multiplier. And we wanted to take some time to kind of look back at the new token economics, governance, and offer some stats to you. And they're going to be actually also distilled in a blog post very soon. And again, to reiterate more or less where we're looking in terms of our ecosystem, we like to, this is a kind of a charge slide, but if you look at the different components, we like to represent the ZRX ecosystem in these parts. We obviously are about creating a tokenized world where value can flow freely from what we call makers and takers. So from the liquidity supply to the liquidity demand. And the pieces of technology that we have in between are really meant to be facilitating that exchange. So as you've heard, we have mesh network that distributes the orders. We have ZRX API that basically gets that ZRX liquidity plus aggregates from other on-chain liquidity and offers it to the liquidity demand side of the house through these applications here. And this liquidity is provided also by market makers. So from professionals that are really providing liquidity to these markets and make sure that the users on the other side have good prices. But what happens actually when you settle a trade? As you know, these trades basically go to ZRX smart contracts. And as you recall, in V3, we introduced this concept of protocol fee, which is paid to an accumulated impulse, then redistributed to market makers and token holders that stake with them. So this is really the focus of the next few slides. We want to walk you through how ZRX Portal is used and how the ZIP process and the votes went over the course of the last few months. So speaking of votes, we had 3 votes this year on ZIP 76, 77, 79. And as part of the new token economics, when you, as a token holder, are staking with a staking pool, you are giving away 50% of your voting power. And as designed, basically the staking pools operators, which are the market makers, gained a significant amount of voting power. And you can see it in these distributions here. Basically, the portion attributed to not a pool operator is actually the smaller part of the decision making of the vote. So basically, the pools have the lion's share of the voting power. We see also that, for example, certain pools like Volifier gained a lot of staking in a system, and with that, basically are able to really make an important decision from a voting standpoint. When we looked at the number of basically the turnout of the votes, actually, we saw a big increase because now basically these staking pools are sort of a delegates of all of those token holders that are staking with them. So basically, if we look at the different votes, we see that basically the staking pools voted on behalf of thousands of token holders. So this is working well as designed, and was like interesting for us to observe that. So definitely an increase in participation and in turnout. Another thing that we observed, for those that are familiar with the staking system, obviously token holders are incentivized to basically stake with the pools that give them the highest reward, and also with the pools that probably represent the best decisions for them in the governance. But we observed that certain pools, as they raised their percentage of rewards shared with token holders, they basically started getting more ZRX staked with them. So we can see it here with I think this is Dust first. They increased their stake share, and they gained basically more share of ZRX. Same thing with Crypto later, and most lately with Volifier, who's the most generous staking pool so far. And we saw that they have gained most of the ZRX stake. Also, it's interesting to note that even Rigo lately bumped up the rewards shared. So we will see whether this is going to bring more people staking with them. So this is another observation we had. In terms of total numbers, more than 5,000 addresses staked so far. We've seen that more or less 5% of the addresses with more than 1,000 ZRX have staked so far. Also, the number of such addresses have increased over time. So we're monitoring a sort of a staking ratio, and it's steadily increasing. A little kind of deep dive on protocol fees. As you are aware, they are indexed on gas price and they're paid per fill. Right now, only on native orders, as Fulvia mentioned, with exchange proxy. On-chain or liquidity is not being charged. So basically, protocol fees are, if you want, highly correlated with the adoption of the protocol. So one of the questions that were out there actually with the new proposals on decreasing the protocol fee was, hey, what's going to happen with the total number of fees if we are going to decrease the fee per trade? And actually, it turns out that they haven't decreased. Actually, the contrary. Obviously, it's hard to determine why, meaning that we had the assumption that a decrease in protocol fee will improve the competitiveness of liquidity. However, it's also true that markets right now are very turbulent in up to the right, obviously, which is a good news. But yeah, we are seeing that basically there's no impact in terms of rewards from a total rewards standpoint. And actually, I think we got one of the highest epochs in terms of rewards in ETH so far, this is the last one. This is a slide related to the ZRX Portal. So as you are aware, the portal is the website where ZRX token holders can vote and they can stake. So these are numbers about the usage of these websites. So we were actually pleased to see that the usage of the websites is steadily increasing too. We are approaching 30,000 active users on a monthly basis. Definitely more than 1,000 on a daily basis that are checking the website. In terms of wallets mostly used, it was pretty interesting to check that, definitely Android devices and Trust wallets are the lion's share of accesses. We then have Coinbase wallet and MetaMask being used in terms of mobile. But in general, yeah, Coinbase and Trust are the wallets that are mostly used. And finally, this is a very interesting slide. This is a ranking number of visits by country. And just wanted to point out that, yes, we know that most of the accesses are actually coming from countries, India, Nigeria, then United States, Philippines, South Africa. So it was also interesting for us to observe that, maybe the vast majority of teams that, it's easy for maybe people based in the US to think that most of the people being active in crypto are within the US or in the Western world, but actually that's not the case. Obviously, there are huge countries out there that are super interested in this space as well. So we are seeing like a good engagement from other countries there, and we'll definitely think about that as we will expand the functionalities of ZRX Portal and other products. And finally, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on a new Gitcoin bounty that we just opened 3 days ago. We actually already assigned it to Isaac, who's also in the call here. But basically, what we're trying to experiment with right now is this pattern where we open up more opportunities for the community to contribute to the ZRX community assets. ZRX Portal, the website, is a community asset. So we want to encourage the participation from other developers out there. And we started off with this experiment, and which basically is about refactoring the way that we integrate wallets. And we can't wait to see how this experiment goes. We're planning to open up more in the future, depending on also how this bounty goes. But yeah, the next one in line is the staking calculator. We already opened the issue, but yeah, soon we're probably gonna be opening another Gitcoin bounty. But what's interesting about this process that we are experimenting with is that later we could apply it to other parts of the stack of ZRX. Obviously, going down to why not mesh and also smart contracts, obviously. And we can pair it with the zip process in the future, where, for example, the community could decide whether to fund a developer to build something on the contracts. And this could be handled via Gitcoin bounties, and then through the classic zip process. So yeah, we're excited to see how this goes. I think, yes, that was all in terms of updates. So curious to see if anyone has any questions. Don't know if anyone has shared. Okay, no other questions so far. We don't have an ecosystem spotlight today, unfortunately. So again, call out if folks know an amazing team or they want to present next time. Feel free to reach out to us. All right. Okay, if there are no other questions, let's close it here then. Thanks for joining, guys, and we'll meet up again in a month. And yeah, as always, feel free to ask for any specific topics for next time in the GitHub repo. And see you next month.